The gunshot echoed through the pines just as Nathan Lawson caught sight of the gray bundle tumbling down the rocky slope. And without thinking, he spurred his horse toward the yelping creature instead of away from it. The autumn of 1876 had painted the Montana Territory in shades of gold and crimson, and Nathan had been checking his trap lines in the wilderness west of Helena when the hunters' rifles shattered the afternoon quiet. He dismounted quickly, his boots crunching on fallen pine needles as he approached the whimpering animal. A wolf pup, no more than 3 months old, lay tangled in a thicket of wild rose bushes, its silver-gray fur matted with burrs and one hind leg twisted at an unnatural angle. "Easy now," Nathan murmured, pulling off his leather gloves. The pup's yellow eyes were wide with terror, its small body trembling as it tried to scramble away despite the injury. More voices carried through the trees, rough laughter and the metallic click of rifles being reloaded. The hunters were getting closer. Nathan didn't pause to consider the foolishness of what he was doing. Wolf pelts brought good money, and these hunters would kill the pup without hesitation. But something in those frightened eyes stopped him, reminded him of his own helplessness when he had been a boy watching his family's farm burn during the war. He wrapped the struggling animal in his coat, ignoring the needle-sharp teeth that grazed his wrist, and secured the bundle against his chest before swinging back into the saddle. "There, someone's got our kill," a voice shouted from the ridge above. Nathan didn't wait to explain. He urged his bay mare into a gallop, weaving through the dense forest with the practiced ease of a man who had spent most of his 32 years in wild country. The hunters fired twice more, but the shots went wide, and soon the sound of pursuit faded behind him. He rode hard for an hour, taking a winding path that would confuse anyone trying to follow, before finally slowing as his cabin came into view in a small clearing beside a creek. The structure was modest, built from hewn logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch that faced east toward the rising sun. Nathan had constructed it himself 3 years ago when he decided to leave behind his work as an Army scout and make a quieter life trapping and trading. He had grown tired of the violence, tired of the endless conflicts between settlers and the native tribes who were being pushed from their ancestral lands. Here, he bothered no one and expected the same courtesy in return. He carried the wolf pup inside, still wrapped in his coat, and laid it gently on the braided rug near the fireplace. The animal had stopped struggling during the ride, exhausted from fear and pain. Nathan lit a lamp and examined the injured leg more carefully. It was broken, but the bone hadn't pierced the skin. He had set breaks before on horses and once on a trapper's arm, but never on a wild animal. Still, he couldn't just let the creature suffer. Working slowly and speaking in low, soothing tones, Nathan fashioned a splint from 2 straight pieces of kindling and strips of cloth torn from an old shirt. The pup whimpered and tried to bite him several times, but its strength was fading. When the splint was secured, Nathan fetched a shallow bowl of water and some dried venison from his stores. The pup lapped at the water desperately but turned its nose away from the meat. "Suit yourself," Nathan said quietly, "but you will need to eat something soon." He made himself coffee and sat in his chair by the fire, watching the small animal. It watched him back, those yellow eyes never leaving his face. There was intelligence there, wariness, but also something else. Recognition, perhaps, that he meant no harm. Nathan found himself thinking about the Cherokee medicine woman who had once told him that animals chose who to trust, and that trust was a sacred thing not to be taken lightly. He wondered what she would make of this situation. As darkness fell outside, the pup finally closed its eyes and slept. Nathan dozed in his chair, waking periodically to add wood to the fire and check on his unexpected guest. He knew keeping a wolf was madness. Even a young one would grow into a predator with instincts that couldn't be tamed. But something had compelled him to intervene, and he had learned long ago to trust those impulses. They had saved his life more than once. Dawn came cold and clear, the first frost of the season glittering on the meadow grass. Nathan woke stiff from sleeping upright and found the wolf pup still curled on the rug, breathing steadily. He stretched, working the kinks from his shoulders, and went outside to tend to his mare and fetch water from the creek. The morning air bit at his face, carrying the scent of pine and coming winter. He was returning with a full bucket when he saw her standing at the edge of his porch. A woman, tall and straight-backed, wearing a dress of doeskin decorated with intricate beadwork in patterns of blue and red. Her long black hair hung in a thick braid over one shoulder, and her face held the kind of beauty that came from strength rather than delicacy. She looked to be in her mid-20s, and her dark eyes studied him with an intensity that made Nathan stop in his tracks. "Can I help you?" he asked, setting down the bucket slowly. His hand instinctively moved toward the knife at his belt, though he sensed no threat from her. She was alone, as far as he could tell, and carried no visible weapons. "You have something that belongs to me," she said. Her English was perfect, touched only slightly with the melodic accent of her native tongue. Nathan's mind raced. "I am not sure what you mean, miss." She tilted her head toward the cabin. "The wolf. I have been tracking him for 2 days. His mother was killed by hunters and he fled. I found him yesterday, but before I could reach him, more hunters came. I watched you take him." "You followed me." Nathan felt a flash of irritation. He prided himself on his awareness, his ability to read the wilderness around him. That this woman had tracked him all the way back to his cabin without his knowledge was unsettling. "I am very good at not being seen when I choose," she replied, and there might have been the faintest hint of amusement in her voice. "I mean you no harm. I only want to make sure the pup is safe." Nathan considered her words. "He has a broken leg. I splinted it last night, but I am no healer. Come look at him if you like." She climbed the porch steps with fluid grace and followed him inside. The wolf pup raised its head at their entrance and immediately began to whine, its tail attempting a weak wag. The woman knelt beside it and spoke in Cherokee, her voice soft and musical. The pup's entire demeanor changed. It tried to crawl toward her despite the splint, whimpering with what could only be joy. "You know this animal?" Nathan asked, though the answer was obvious. "His mother denned near my camp last spring," the woman explained, running her hands gently over the pup's body, checking the splint Nathan had made. "I left food for her when hunting was scarce. She learned to trust me, and so did her young. When she was killed, I tried to find the pups, but they scattered. This one I have been searching for." She looked up at Nathan. "You did good work with this splint. He will heal, though he may always walk with a slight limp." "You are welcome to take him," Nathan said, though he found himself oddly reluctant to let the animal go. In just one night, the pup had become a presence in his solitary life. The woman stood, studying Nathan with those penetrating dark eyes. "The journey back to my camp is 2 days on foot. He cannot travel yet, and he seems comfortable here. Perhaps, if you are willing, we could care for him together until he is stronger." Nathan knew he should say no. Having this woman stay at his cabin, even temporarily, would complicate his carefully ordered existence. But he found himself nodding before he could think better of it. "I suppose that makes sense. You can have the bed. I will sleep out here by the fire." "That is not necessary. I can make my own shelter." "Not in this cold. There is a storm coming, probably tonight. I can feel it in my bones." Nathan moved to the window, looking at the sky. The clouds were building on the western horizon, heavy and gray. Besides, it is just a bed. I have spent half my life sleeping on the ground. The woman was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Very well, thank you for your hospitality. My name is Peta, Nathan Lawson. He held out his hand, and after a brief hesitation, she took it. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused from work. Are you hungry? I was about to make breakfast. I could eat, Peta said simply. Nathan set about making a meal of fried cornmeal cakes, bacon, and coffee. Peta settled on the floor beside the wolf pup, speaking to it in Cherokee and occasionally glancing around the cabin. Nathan felt self-conscious about the sparse furnishings, the utilitarian nature of everything. There was nothing decorative, nothing soft or welcoming. It was a place to survive, not to live. You have been alone here long? Peta asked as he handed her a tin plate. 3 years. Built the cabin myself. Nathan sat in his chair, balancing his own plate on his knee. Trapped beaver and mink, sell the pelts in Helena. It is a simple life, but it suits me. You were a soldier. It wasn't a question. Nathan raised an eyebrow. What makes you say that? The way you move, the scars on your hands, and your eyes, they have seen things you wish to forget. Peta bit into a cornmeal cake, chewing thoughtfully. Many soldiers came through Cherokee land during the war. I learned to recognize them. I was an Army scout after the war ended, Nathan admitted. Rode with various outfits through the territories, but I got tired of the fighting, the killing. So I came here. To hide, Peta said softly. To find peace, Nathan corrected, though her words stung because they held truth. What about you? Where is your camp north of here in the high country near the Big Belt Mountains? My father's people settled there after we were forced to leave our lands in the east. We are small in number now, perhaps 50 souls, but we survive. There was pride in her voice and also sorrow. I gather herbs and medicines from the forest, hunt when needed. I prefer the solitude of the wilderness to the crowded camp. We have that in common then, Nathan said. They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the occasional whimper from the wolf pup. Outside, the wind began to pick up, whistling through the pines. Nathan's prediction about the storm was proving accurate. After breakfast, Peta examined Nathan's medicine supplies and found them wanting. You have nothing for infection, nothing to reduce fever. If his leg becomes poisoned, he will die. I have whiskey, Nathan offered. Peta shook her head. I need yarrow, golden seal, and willow bark at minimum. I saw some growing along the creek. I will gather what I need. The storm is coming fast. We should wait. All the more reason to go now before it arrives. Peta was already moving toward the door. Nathan grabbed his coat. Then I am coming with you. This is my land, and I know where things grow. They spent the next hour moving along the creek bank and into the surrounding forest, with Peta pointing out plants and Nathan helping her collect them. She moved through the wilderness like she was part of it, her steps silent, her hands sure as she selected leaves and roots. Nathan found himself watching her more than he probably should, noting the graceful line of her neck, the way her braids swung as she bent to examine a plant. You are staring, Peta said without looking at him. Nathan felt heat rise to his face. Sorry, I have not had much company in a long while. I forgot how to act around people. You act fine, she straightened, her arms full of plants. But if you are going to stare, at least help me carry these. The first drops of rain began to fall as they hurried back to the cabin. Within minutes, it became a downpour, cold and driving, mixed with sleet. They burst through the door soaked and shivering, and Nathan quickly built up the fire while Peta changed into dry clothes from her pack. She had been carrying supplies all along, he realized, prepared to camp in the wilderness while tracking the wolf. She emerged from the bedroom wearing another doeskin dress, this one simpler in design but no less beautiful. Her hair was loose now, falling in damp waves past her waist. Nathan forced himself to look away and focus on hanging up their wet outer clothes to dry. Peta set to work grinding the herbs she had gathered, mixing them into poultices and tinctures with practiced efficiency. She applied a paste to the wolf pup's leg, securing it with clean bandages, and managed to get the animal to swallow some willow bark tea mixed with bits of meat. The pup, seemingly exhausted by all the attention, fell into a deep sleep. The storm raged outside, wind hammering against the cabin walls and rain drumming on the roof. Nathan made more coffee and brought out his store of dried apples, and they sat by the fire as afternoon faded into evening. The forced intimacy of the situation made Nathan acutely aware of every detail. The way Peta's hair dried into glossy waves, the small scar on her left wrist, the methodical way she ate each slice of apple. "Tell me about your family," Peta said eventually. "How did you come to be here, alone in the Montana wilderness?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, debating how much to share. But something about this woman made him want to talk, to break the silence he had maintained for so long. "I grew up in Tennessee. Small farm, good people. My parents, 2 brothers, a sister. When the war came, my brothers and I joined up, thought we were doing the right thing. By the time it ended, both my brothers were dead, my parents had lost the farm, and I couldn't go back to the life I'd known. So I went west, kept moving until I found a place that felt far enough away from the memories. But the memories came with you," Peta said gently. "They always do." Nathan stared into the fire. "What about your family? My mother died when I was young, a fever that swept through our camp. My father is a respected elder, a keeper of our stories and traditions. He wanted me to marry, to have children, to live a traditional life. But I wanted to learn healing, to be useful in other ways. We argued about it often." Peta's expression grew distant. 3 years ago, a young warrior from another band asked for my hand. His name was Running Deer, and he was kind and brave. I thought perhaps I could have both the life I wanted and the life my father wished for me. We were married in the summer, and by autumn he was dead, killed in a skirmish with soldiers who accused our hunting party of stealing cattle. "I am sorry," Nathan said, and meant it. "It was a long time ago, but it changed something in me. I stopped trying to be what others wanted and chose my own path. Some in my camp think I am strange, spending so much time alone in the forests, but it is where I feel closest to the spirits, to the medicine that heals. You ever feel lonely?" The question slipped out before Nathan could stop it. Peta turned to look at him, and in the firelight her eyes seemed to glow. "Yes, don't you?" "Yes," Nathan admitted. They held each other's gaze for a long moment, and Nathan felt something shift between them, a recognition of shared solitude and shared survival. Then Peta looked away, breaking the spell, and rose to check on the wolf pup. The storm continued through the night. Nathan made up a bedroll by the fire while Peta retired to the bedroom with the door left slightly ajar. He lay awake for hours, listening to the wind and rain, acutely aware of her presence just a few feet away. He couldn't remember the last time a woman had been in his home in his life. After the war, after everything he had seen and done, he had convinced himself he was better off alone. But now, with Peta here, he remembered what it was like to want company, to want connection. Morning came gray and cold, the storm having passed but leaving frost in its wake. Nathan woke to find Peta already up, tending to the fire and the wolf pup. The animal was more alert today, and actually ate some of the meat she offered. Its tail wagged weakly, and it licked her fingers with a small pink tongue. "He is healing well," Peta said as Nathan sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The infection I worried about has not set in. He will be strong again. That is good. Nathan pulled on his boots and coat. I need to check my trap lines today. Will you be all right here alone? I have been alone most of my life. I think I will manage. There was dry humor in her tone. But if you find any game, we could use fresh meat. I am tired of jerky and dried venison. Nathan smiled, surprising himself. He couldn't remember the last time he had smiled at someone. I will see what I can do. He spent the day riding his trap lines, checking the snares he had set for rabbit and marten. The traps were moderately successful, yielding 3 rabbits and a fox. But it was the deer he spotted near a salt lick that made him reach for his rifle. A clean shot brought down a young buck, and Nathan Field dressed it efficiently, loading the meat onto his horse. It was more than they could eat fresh, but he could smoke the rest, and he found himself wanting to provide for Peta, to show her he was capable. When he returned to the cabin in the late afternoon, the smell of something wonderful greeted him. Peta had found his stores of wild rice and was cooking it with herbs and dried berries, creating a fragrant mixture that made Nathan's stomach growl with hunger. She looked up as he entered, her face brightening at the sight of the deer meat. "You are a good hunter," she said approvingly. "I learned from the best. Spent 2 years riding with a scout named River Song, a Lakota man who could track anything. He taught me to read sign, to move like the forest creatures." Nathan began to butcher the deer properly, separating the choice cuts from the portions that would need to be smoked. He also taught me that animals are not just resources. They give their lives to sustain ours, and that is a sacred exchange. He sounds like a wise man. He died 5 years back, arrow through the throat during a Crow raid. He was trying to protect a settler family that had camped in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nathan's hand stilled on the knife. "I carried his body 3 days to return him to his people. After that, I didn't have the heart to keep scouting." Peta came to stand beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. "You honor him by remembering, by living according to what he taught you." They prepared the evening meal together, working in an easy rhythm that surprised Nathan. Peta cooked the venison with wild onions and mushrooms she had gathered from his storage cellar, while Nathan prepared the rice and set the table. The wolf pup watched them from its spot by the fire, gnawing contentedly on a bone. As they ate, Peta told Nathan about her work as a healer, describing the plants and remedies she used, the births she had attended, the injuries she had treated. Her voice held a passion that made Nathan understand this was more than just a skill to her. It was a calling, a purpose that gave her life meaning. In turn, Nathan found himself talking about his trapping, about reading weather and animal behavior, about the satisfaction of providing for himself through knowledge and effort. The days began to blur together. The wolf pup, whom Peta had named Gray Wind in Cherokee, grew stronger. His leg healed slowly but steadily, and within a week he was putting weight on it, hobbling around the cabin with increasing confidence. Nathan found himself building a larger pen outside where the young wolf could exercise safely, and Peta began teaching the animal to come when called, to accept handling, to trust. "You are not going to be able to release him back to the wild," Nathan observed one afternoon as he watched Peta play with Gray Wind in the meadow behind the cabin. The wolf pup pounced on her trailing braid like a cat, making her laugh, the sound bright and unexpected. "I know," Peta admitted. "He has become too accustomed to humans. If I release him, he will approach others who will not be kind. He will be killed for his pelt or shot as a threat." "He can stay here," Nathan offered, "if you think that is best for him." Peta looked at Nathan with an expression he couldn't quite read. "And what about me? Can I stay too?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications. Nathan's heart hammered in his chest. "I thought you had to return to your camp. Your father, your people." "I should," Peta said softly, "but I find I do not want to, not yet." "Then stay," Nathan said, the words coming easily despite the magnitude of what he was offering. "Stay as long as you want." Something changed between them after that conversation. The invisible barriers they had maintained began to crumble. Nathan found reasons to touch Peta's hand when passing her things, to stand close when they cooked together. Peta began to smile more freely, to share stories of her childhood, to ask Nathan about his dreams and fears. At night, they sat by the fire talking until late, the conversations growing deeper and more personal. It was 2 weeks after Peta's arrival when the first real kiss happened. They had been outside splitting wood, working side by side in the crisp autumn air. Peta's hair had come loose from its braid, whipping across her face in the wind, and Nathan reached out without thinking to brush it back. His fingers lingered on her cheek, and she turned her face into his palm, her eyes closing. The axe fell from Nathan's other hand, forgotten, and then he was pulling her close, and she was rising on her toes to meet him. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, but it quickly deepened as weeks of suppressed longing broke free. Nathan's hands tangled in Peta's hair while her arms wrapped around his neck, and for a moment the rest of the world ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of her mouth, the press of her body against his, the rightness of holding her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I did not think I would ever feel this way again," he whispered. "Did not think I deserved to." "What we deserve and what we receive are often different things," Peta replied, her hands cradling his face. "But this feels like a gift I am allowed to accept." They made love for the first time that night, slowly and tenderly in Nathan's narrow bed. Peta's body was strong and beautiful, marked with small scars from a life lived close to the wilderness. Nathan traced each one with his fingers and lips, learning her as she learned him. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, watching firelight dance across the ceiling and listening to gray wind's quiet breathing from the main room. "I love you," Nathan said into the darkness, the words both terrifying and liberating. "I know it has only been a few weeks, but I love you, Peta." "I love you too," she replied, her hand finding his under the blankets. "From the moment you opened your door to me, covered in mud and defensive, protecting a wolf pup that could have gotten you killed. I saw your heart then, Nathan Lawson, and I wanted to know it." The autumn deepened into early winter. Nathan taught Peta to shoot his rifle, and she taught him the Cherokee names for constellations. They hunted together, prepared the cabin for the coming cold together, fell into the rhythms of a shared life with surprising ease. Gray Wind grew rapidly, his injured leg healing enough that he could run and play, though Peta had been right about the slight limp that remained. The young wolf bonded to both of them, following Nathan on his trap line checks and curling up beside Peta when she worked on her medicines. It was December when 3 riders approached the cabin. Nathan spotted them from a distance and immediately went inside to get his rifle. Peta saw his tension and moved to the window, her hand reaching for the knife she always kept at her belt. "You know them?" she asked quietly. "No. But unexpected visitors usually mean trouble." Nathan checked that the rifle was loaded, though he hoped he wouldn't need to use it. The riders drew closer, and Nathan felt his stomach tighten. They wore the rough clothes of trappers or hunters, and each man was armed. They reined in at the edge of his property, and the one in front, a burly man with a dark beard, called out, "You the fellow who stole our wolf pup back in October?" Nathan stepped onto the porch, keeping the rifle pointed down but ready. "I am the fellow who saved an injured animal from being killed for sport. Is there something I can do for you gentlemen? We tracked that wolf's mother for 2 days before we got her, the bearded man said, his voice hard. And we had a right to her pups. You interfered with our hunt. The pup was injured and no use to you. I did you a favor. Nathan kept his voice level, non-confrontational. And that was months ago. Seems like a long time to hold a grudge. We were up in the high country checking our lines. Another rider spoke up, younger with a scar across his left cheek. Just got back to this area. Heard tell of a trapper living alone out here and we figured it had to be you. We want compensation for what you took. I took nothing that belonged to you. Wild animals do not have owners. Nathan's patience was wearing thin. Now I've told you politely there is nothing for you here. I suggest you move along. The bearded man's eyes narrowed, and then his gaze shifted to the window where Peta was visible. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. Well now, maybe we will take compensation in trade. That is a mighty pretty squaw you have got in there. Nathan's blood went cold, then hot with rage. He raised the rifle in one smooth motion, aiming directly at the bearded man's chest. You will leave my property now, or I will shoot you where you sit. Your choice. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. The three riders exchanged glances, clearly calculating their odds. 3 against 1 should have favored them, but Nathan's rifle was already aimed and his stance spoke of experience with violence. Behind him, the door opened and Peta stepped out, her own rifle raised, making it 2 against 3. We do not want trouble, the youngest rider said nervously. Come on, Jake, let it go. It is not worth dying over. The bearded man, Jake, glared at Nathan with pure hatred. This is not over, Lawson. We remember faces. So do I, Nathan replied coldly. And I have friends in Helena who will be very interested to know about 3 men threatening a homesteader on his own land. The law might not care much about a wolf pup, but they care about property rights and threats to settlers. It was a bluff, mostly. Nathan had few real friends in Helena, and the law was uncertain this far into the wilderness, but the threat worked. Jake spat in the dirt and wheeled his horse around, the other 2 following. They rode off at a gallop, disappearing into the forest. Nathan didn't lower his rifle until they were out of sight, and even then his whole body remained tense, ready for them to circle back. Peta touched his arm gently. Come inside, they are gone. For now. Nathan followed her into the cabin, finally setting down the rifle. His hands were shaking slightly with the after-effects of adrenaline. But men like that, they do not forget, and they might come back. Then we will be ready. Peta cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. You are not alone anymore, Nathan. Whatever comes, we face it together. He pulled her close, holding her tightly. Gray wind whined from his place by the fire, sensing their distress, and padded over to press against Nathan's leg. Nathan reached down to scratch behind the wolf's ears, drawing comfort from the animal's solid presence. Maybe you should go back to your camp, Nathan said reluctantly. Just for a while, until I am sure those men have moved on. I do not want you in danger because of me. No, Peta said firmly. I am not leaving you. My place is here now, Nathan. With you, your father, your people, they must be worried about you. You have been gone for months. I will send word to them that I am safe, Peta promised. There are friendly traders who pass through Helena, people who know how to reach my father's camp. But I am not leaving. This is my home now if you will have me. If I will have you. Nathan almost laughed despite the tension. Peta, you are the best thing that has happened to me in more years than I can count. I am just afraid I will not be able to protect you, that my past or some vengeful hunters will bring harm to your door. Our door, Peta corrected, and we will protect each other. That is what love means, is it not? Standing together against whatever the world throws at us. Nathan kissed her then, deeply and desperately, trying to convey everything he felt, all the love and fear and hope tangled up inside him. When they finally pulled apart, he said, "Marry me. I know it is fast, I know there are complications, but marry me, Peta. Let me stand before God and man and claim you as my wife." Peta's eyes glistened with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Nathan Lawson." They rode to Helena the next week, a journey of 3 days. Gray wind came with them, ranging ahead and circling back, still wild enough to be wary but domesticated enough to stay close. The wolf drew stares in town, but Nathan simply explained he was a dog crossed with wolf blood, and most people accepted this without question. Finding someone to perform the marriage proved challenging. The town's preacher took one look at Peta and refused, claiming he wouldn't sanctify a union between a white man and a savage. Nathan's temper flared, but Peta pulled him away before he could do something they would regret. Instead, they found a justice of the peace, an older man named Samuel Breen who had served as a judge during the territorial days and held more progressive views. "I don't see why any two people who love each other should not marry," Breen said, examining them over his spectacles. "The world is hard enough without us making it harder for no good reason. Do you have witnesses?" They found 2 witnesses easily enough among the townspeople. A shopkeeper's wife who had always been kind to Nathan when he traded his pelts, and a weathered trapper named Douglas who had shared campfires with Nathan over the years. The ceremony was simple, conducted in Breen's small office above a dry goods store, but Nathan had never felt anything more profound than the moment he slipped a simple gold band onto Peta's finger and heard her voice, strong and clear, promising to love him until death parted them. Afterward, they purchased supplies for the winter: flour, sugar, coffee, ammunition, and fabric for Peta to make new clothes. Nathan also bought her a proper winter coat, heavy wool lined with fur, refusing to listen to her protests about the expense. They spent one night at a boarding house, their first time sleeping in a real bed together as husband and wife, and Nathan made love to Peta with the joy of a man who had never expected to be this happy. The return journey was slower, their pack horse heavily laden with supplies. They stopped to camp the second night in a sheltered valley where hot springs created pools of steaming water. Despite the cold, they stripped and bathed together, washing away the grime of travel and making love in the warm water under a canopy of stars. Gray Wind watched from the shore, his head tilted in apparent confusion, and they laughed at his expression. "He is going to be enormous when he finishes growing," Peta observed, watching the wolf shake water from his fur. "Larger than any dog, probably 80 or 90 pounds. "Will he be dangerous?" Nathan asked, running soapy hands over Peta's shoulders. "To us or to others?" "Not to us. We are his pack now, but to strangers, yes, he could be. We will need to be careful to train him well." Peta turned in Nathan's arms, wrapping her legs around his waist. "But I believe he was meant to be with us. Everything that happened, you finding him, me tracking him to your door, it all feels like destiny." "I am not sure I believe in destiny," Nathan admitted, "but I believe in this in us. Whatever force in the universe brought us together, I am grateful for it." They returned to the cabin to find it undisturbed, no sign that Jake and his companions had returned. Nathan began to relax, to hope that the men had moved on to easier prey, or had been discouraged by the unified front he and Peta had presented. The winter settled in properly, bringing heavy snows that blanketed the world in white and kept them close to the cabin for days at a time. Those months were the happiest of Nathan's life. He and Peta developed routines, learned each other's habits and rhythms, built a life together in the wilderness. Peta taught him Cherokee words and songs, stories of her people's history and beliefs. Nathan shared his knowledge of trapping and tracking, and together they tended Gray Wind, who grew exactly as large as Peta had predicted, his wolf nature becoming more apparent with each passing week. The wolf was remarkably intelligent, learning commands in both English and Cherokee, understanding the boundaries of acceptable behavior. He hunted rabbits and small game for himself, but always returned to the cabin, sleeping on a thick rug Nathan had made for him near the fireplace. When strangers approached, which happened rarely in the deep winter, Gray Wind's demeanor changed completely, becoming alert and aggressive, his teeth bared in warning. "He is better than any guard dog," Nathan remarked one morning after the wolf had alerted them to a wandering elk that had come too close to the cabin. "I feel safer knowing he is here." "As do I," Peta agreed. She was grinding corn for bread, her hands working the stone pestle with practiced ease. "Though I think people would fear us less if we had a normal dog." "Let them fear us a little," Nathan said, coming to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Better that than have them think we are easy targets." Peta leaned back against him. "I sent that letter to my father through the trader, told him about our marriage. I wonder if he received it, what he thinks." "Are you worried he will disapprove?" "Probably. He wanted me to marry within our people, to preserve our traditions and bloodlines. But he also wants me to be happy, and I think he will see that you make me happy." Peta set down the pestle and turned in Nathan's embrace. "Do you worry what your family would think, if they knew you married a Cherokee woman?" Nathan considered this. He had not spoken to any of his family in years, had no idea if his parents still lived or where his sister had ended up after the war. "If they knew you, they would love you," he said honestly. "And if they did not, that would be their loss, not ours." Spring came slowly, the snows melting in fits and starts. As the weather warmed, Peta began disappearing into the forest for hours at a time, gathering the early plants she needed for her medicines. Nathan worried at first, but Gray Wind always accompanied her, and he had to trust that between the wolf's protection and Peta's own considerable wilderness skills, she would be safe. It was on one of these expeditions that Peta found the child. She came running back to the cabin in late afternoon, breathless and agitated, with Gray Wind loping beside her. "Nathan, there is a girl lost in the forest. She is maybe 8 or 9 years old, wandering alone. I tried to speak to her, but she ran from me. We need to find her before nightfall." Nathan grabbed his rifle and a pack with supplies. "Where did you see her?" "Near the old beaver pond, maybe 2 miles north. She was heading east toward the Badlands." Peta was already moving, leading the way at a near run. They tracked the child for over an hour, following small footprints in the muddy ground and broken branches where she had pushed through underbrush. Gray Wind proved invaluable, his nose leading them when the visual trail disappeared. Finally, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, they heard crying coming from a cluster of rocks. The girl was huddled in a small cave formed by tumbled boulders, her dress torn and muddy, her face streaked with tears. She looked up with terrified blue eyes as Nathan and Peta approached and started to scream. "Easy, easy," Nathan said, holding up his hands to show he was unarmed. "We are not going to hurt you. Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The girl just kept screaming, pressing herself against the back of the cave. Gray Wind whined, clearly disturbed by the child's distress, and lay down a few feet away, making himself as non-threatening as possible. Peta knelt slowly, speaking in a gentle voice. "My name is Peta. This is Nathan. We want to help you. Are you hurt?" The girl's screaming faded to sobs. "Mama and Papa, they are dead. Bad men came to our wagon, shot Papa and hurt Mama, told me to run, and I did. I ran and ran, but I got lost and I do not know how to get home." Nathan and Peta exchanged horrified glances. "How long ago did this happen?" Nathan asked gently. "Yesterday, I think, or maybe the day before, I am not sure." The girl's voice was small, exhausted. "Do you remember where your wagon was?" The girl shook her head. "Just that there was a creek and lots of trees. Everything looks the same out here." "That is all right," Peta said soothingly. "You are safe now. We are going to take you to our home, give you food and a warm place to sleep. Then tomorrow we will figure out how to find your family, all right. They are dead," the girl whispered. "I saw them fall." Nathan's jaw clenched with anger. He could guess what had happened. Raiders, the kind of men who preyed on isolated settlers, killing and stealing. It was far too common out here, where law was scarce and help was often days away. The girl, who eventually told them her name was Emily, was too exhausted to walk far. Nathan ended up carrying her on his back while Peta led the way home. Gray wind ranged ahead, his behavior protective, as if understanding the child was now part of their pack. Back at the cabin, they fed Emily soup and bread, wrapped her in blankets, and put her to bed in their own room while they took bedrolls by the fire. The child fell asleep almost instantly, her small body succumbing to exhaustion and trauma. "What do we do?" Peta whispered once they were sure Emily was sleeping. "We cannot return her to her parents if they are truly dead. And even if we report this to the authorities in Helena, what will happen to her? She will end up in an orphanage, alone and grieving." "I know." Nathan stared into the fire, his mind racing. "First we need to find the wagon, confirm what happened. Maybe there are relatives listed in their things, someone we can contact. But if not, if there is no one else, maybe we could keep her, at least temporarily." Peta looked at him with surprise. "You would take in a stranger's child?" "Someone sheltered me once," Nathan said quietly. "After the war, when I had nothing and no one. A Cheyenne woman named Morning Bird found me half dead from fever and nursed me back to health. She asked nothing in return, just showed me kindness when I desperately needed it. Maybe it is time I paid that forward." The next morning, Emily was calmer but still deeply traumatized. She flinched at sudden movements and refused to eat unless Peta sat beside her. Gray Wind seemed to understand the child needed gentleness, and lay with his head on her lap, letting her bury her fingers in his fur. Nathan rode out alone to search for the wagon, following Emily's fragmentary directions and looking for any sign of violence or recent passage. He found it in early afternoon, an overturned wagon beside a creek, exactly as the girl had described. Two bodies lay nearby, a man and a woman in their 30s, dead from gunshot wounds. They had been robbed of anything valuable, their belongings scattered across the ground. Nathan buried them as best he could in the rocky soil, marking the graves with stacked stones. He searched through the remaining possessions and found a Bible with names written inside. Robert and Sarah Fletcher, married in Kansas in 1862. And listed below their names, Emily Ann Fletcher, born 1867. There was no mention of other relatives, no letters or documents suggesting anyone they might contact. He returned to the cabin with what useful items had been left behind: clothes, cooking pots, a few tools. Emily began crying when she saw her mother's shawl among the items, and Peta wrapped it around the child's shoulders, holding her while she wept. "I could not find any information about relatives," Nathan told Peta quietly that night while Emily slept. "For all we know, she has no one." "Then she has us," Peta said firmly. "If you agree, Nathan, I know we have only been married a few months, that this is not what you signed up for when you asked me to be your wife, but I cannot send this child away to an uncertain fate." I agree completely, Nathan assured her. We will keep her, raise her as our own if necessary. It will not be easy, but what about our life is easy? They rode to Helena a week later, all three of them plus Gray Wind, to report the murders to the territorial marshal. The lawman took down the information but did not seem optimistic about finding the killers. Could be any number of raiding parties working these parts, he said wearily. Without better descriptions or evidence, there is not much I can do. They also visited the justice of the peace who had married them, explaining the situation with Emily. Samuel Breen listened carefully, then drew up papers granting Nathan and Peta temporary guardianship of the child, with the understanding that if relatives appeared later with valid claims, the situation would be reassessed. But between you and me, Breen said as he signed the papers, I do not think anyone will come forward. This territory is full of orphans and broken families. Better this child has two people willing to care for her than end up in some church home in the East. The journey back to the cabin felt different with Emily riding on the horse in front of Nathan. They were a family now, unexpectedly and suddenly, but a family nonetheless. Peta rode beside them, and Gray Wind ranged around them all, and Nathan thought about how much his life had changed in less than a year. He had gone from a solitary trapper who expected to live and die alone to a husband, and now, in effect, a father. The transition was not easy. Emily woke screaming from nightmares several times a week. She was terrified of strangers, refusing to let Nathan or Peta out of her sight for the first month. But slowly, with patience and consistent kindness, she began to heal. Peta taught her to recognize healing herbs and to cook. Nathan taught her to fish in the creek and to recognize animal tracks. Gray Wind became her constant companion and protector, seeming to understand that the small human needed special care. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days of sunshine and warmth. The meadow behind the cabin bloomed with wildflowers, and Peta planted a small garden near the creek, growing beans and squash and corn. Emily helped with the planting, her small hands patting dirt over seeds with intense concentration. You think she will be all right? Nathan asked Peta one evening as they watched Emily throw sticks for Gray Wind in the fading light. Long term, I mean, after what she witnessed. I think so, Peta said thoughtfully. Children are resilient, and she has us and Gray Wind and a safe place to grow. It will take time, but she will learn to be happy again. As if to prove Peta's words, Emily laughed as Gray Wind caught the stick mid-air and brought it back to her, dropping it at her feet and wagging his tail expectantly. The sound of the child's laughter, so pure and unexpected, brought tears to Nathan's eyes. Thank you, he said to Peta, taking her hand. For saying yes when I asked you to marry me. For staying when you could have left. For taking in Emily. For making this cabin feel like a real home. Peta leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for sheltering a wolf pup from hunters. If you had not done that, I never would have found you. That night, after Emily was asleep and the cabin was quiet except for Gray Wind's soft snoring, Nathan and Peta lay in bed talking about the future. They discussed expanding the cabin, adding a room for Emily so she could have privacy as she grew older. They talked about the possibility of more children, their own children, brothers or sisters for Emily to grow up with. I would like that, Peta said, her hand resting on Nathan's chest. A child of our blood to raise alongside Emily. A big family, full of noise and life. I never thought I would want that, Nathan admitted. After the war, after everything I had lost, I convinced myself I was not meant for family life. But now, with you and Emily, I want it all. A full life, a real home. Autumn came again, marking a full year since Nathan had rescued the wolf pup that changed his life. Gray Wind was fully grown now, a magnificent animal weighing close to 90 pounds, his silver-gray coat thick and glossy. He was protective of their small family, especially of Emily, who treated him more like a sibling than a pet. It was October when Peta told Nathan she was pregnant. They were checking the trap lines together, riding side by side through the golden forest when she suddenly reined in her horse and turned to look at him. "I am carrying a child," she said simply. "Our child. He or she will be born in early spring." Nathan dismounted quickly and helped Peta down, pulling her into his arms. "Are you certain? Are you well? Do you need to rest?" "I am certain, and I am well, and I do not need to rest," Peta said, laughing at his concern. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Nathan. I am not fragile. I know, I just want to take care of you, want to make sure you and the baby are safe." Nathan placed his hand gently over her still flat stomach. "A child, our child, I can hardly believe it." They told Emily that evening, and the girl's reaction was pure joy. "A baby, really? I am going to be a big sister." She danced around the cabin, making Gray Wind bark with excitement. "Can I help take care of it? Can I teach it things?" "Of course you can," Peta assured her. "The baby will be lucky to have you as a sister." The winter was hard, as winters in Montana often were, but the cabin was warm and their stores of food were plentiful. Peta's pregnancy progressed normally, her body swelling with new life. Nathan found himself watching her constantly, marveling at the changes, terrified something would go wrong. He had seen women die in childbirth before. The frontier was unforgiving, and medical help was often non-existent. "You are staring again," Peta said one evening in late February. She was sitting by the fire mending clothes, her swollen belly making the task awkward. "I can feel your worry from across the room. I cannot help it. I just want everything to be all right." Nathan set aside the leather harness he was repairing. "I wish there was a doctor closer, someone who could be here when the baby comes. I am a healer, Nathan. I know what to do. And if there are complications, Helena is only 3 days away." Peta set down her sewing and held out her hand. "Come here." Nathan crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. Peta took his hand and placed it on her stomach, and he felt a strong kick beneath his palm. Their child, active and alive. The fear did not completely fade, but it was tempered by wonder. "He or she is strong," Peta said softly. "I can feel it. This baby wants to live, wants to meet us. Have faith, my love." The baby came in early April, on a morning when the world was caught between winter and spring. Peta's labor began at dawn, and by midday Nathan was pacing the cabin like a caged animal while Emily sat wide-eyed in the corner with Gray Wind's head in her lap. Peta had sent Nathan out of the bedroom, insisting she knew what to do, and his hovering was not helping. The hours dragged by. Nathan prayed to a God he had not spoken to in years, bargaining and pleading for Peta's life, for the baby's life. Emily fell asleep despite her excitement, curled against Gray Wind's warm side. And finally, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, a thin wail pierced the air. Nathan burst into the bedroom without invitation and found Peta sitting up in bed, exhausted and pale but smiling, holding a small bundle wrapped in soft cloth. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Nathan approached on shaking legs and looked down at the tiny red face, the miniature hands waving in the air. His son. His and Peta's. The baby's eyes were dark like his mother's, and he had a thick shock of black hair. Nathan felt tears streaming down his face and did not bother to wipe them away. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Peta. Thank you for this gift." "What should we name him?" Peta asked, adjusting the baby so Nathan could hold him. Nathan took his son carefully, supporting the tiny head, amazed by how light and fragile the baby felt. "I was thinking Nathaniel, for my father and for the grandfather he will never meet." "Nathaniel Lawson," Peta said, trying out the name. "I like it. And perhaps a Cherokee middle name, Wea, which means wolf, for gray wind who brought us together." "Nathaniel Wea Lawson," Nathan repeated, looking down at his son. "Welcome to the world, little one. You have two parents who already love you more than life and a sister who cannot wait to meet you." Emily burst into the room then, having woken to the baby's crying, and climbed onto the bed to peer at her new brother. Gray Wind followed more cautiously, sniffing the air and whining softly. Peta called the wolf over and let him sniff the baby carefully, establishing that this new small human was part of the pack to be protected. The months that followed were exhausting and joyful in equal measure. Baby Nathaniel was healthy and strong, nursing well and growing quickly. Emily was a devoted big sister, always wanting to hold him or help with his care. Gray Wind appointed himself guardian, lying beside the baby's cradle and growling if anyone approached too quickly. Nathan expanded the cabin that summer, adding a second bedroom so Emily could have her own space and the baby could eventually move out of their room. He also built a larger barn to house their growing number of animals: the horses, 2 milk cows he had traded for, chickens for eggs, and a goat Peta insisted they needed for milk and cheese. Life was busy and full and good. Nathan's trapping business was successful enough to provide for their needs, and Peta traded her medicines in Helena for goods they could not produce themselves. They were building something real, something lasting, and Nathan marveled daily at how different his life was from the solitary existence he had once accepted as his fate. It was in September, when Nathaniel was 5 months old and autumn was painting the mountains gold again, that trouble returned. Nathan was out checking his trap lines when he spotted smoke rising from the direction of his cabin, too much smoke for a normal cooking fire. His heart seized with terror, and he spurred his horse into a gallop. He smelled the smoke before he saw the flames. Someone had set fire to his barn, and the structure was fully engulfed, the animals screaming inside. Nathan leaped from his horse and ran toward the barn, but strong hands grabbed him from behind. "Not so fast, Lawson." It was Jake, the bearded hunter from a year ago, and he was not alone. The other 2 men from before were there, along with 2 new faces. 5 armed men against Nathan alone and his family somewhere nearby in danger. "Where are Peta and the children?" Nathan demanded, struggling against Jake's grip. "Oh, do not worry. My boys are keeping them company in the cabin. As long as you cooperate, they will not be harmed." Jake's breath was sour with whiskey. "You cost us a lot of money, Lawson. That wolf mother's pelt would have been worth a fortune, and her pups too. Then you had to go and play hero, and you embarrassed us to boot. We have been planning how to pay you back for a long time." "The pelt of one wolf was not worth this," Nathan said, his mind racing, trying to figure out how to get to his family. "You burned my barn, killed my animals. What more do you want? We want you to suffer like we suffered. We want you to know what it feels like to lose everything." Jake shoved Nathan forward. "Now you are going to watch while we take everything you value." They dragged Nathan toward the cabin. He fought every step, but with 5 men against 1, he was quickly subdued, his hands bound behind his back. His mind was screaming, terror for Peta and Emily and baby Nathaniel overwhelming all rational thought. The cabin door burst open, and one of the new men dragged Peta out by her arm. She was holding Nathaniel, and Emily clung to her skirt, crying. Peta's face was bruised, and Nathan felt rage like he had never known surge through him. "You touch them again, and I will kill every one of you," he snarled. Big words from a man tied up and helpless, Jake laughed. Now here is what is going to happen. We are going to take that pretty wife of yours and have ourselves some fun. You are going to watch. Then we are going to burn your cabin just like we burned your barn. And if you are lucky, we might let you live so you can spend the rest of your days remembering this. But Jake had made a crucial mistake. In dragging Nathan and Peta outside and creating chaos and noise, he had woken Gray Wind from wherever the wolf had been sleeping. The animal came around the corner of the cabin like a silver ghost, his hackles raised, teeth bared in a snarl that promised death. "What the hell is that?" one of the men shouted. Gray Wind did not wait for an answer. He launched himself at the man holding Peta, 100 pounds of fury in teeth and claws. The man screamed as the wolf's jaws closed on his arm, driving him to the ground. Peta pulled free and ran with the children toward the woods. Chaos erupted. The men pulled their guns, shooting at Gray Wind, but the wolf was too fast, moving like smoke between them. Nathan used the distraction to throw himself sideways into Jake, knocking the bigger man off balance. They went down together, Nathan fighting to free his bound hands. More gunshots. Nathan heard Gray Wind yelp and feared the worst. But then Peta was there, having circled back, and she had Nathan's rifle. She fired once, and one of the men dropped. She fired again, and another man clutched his shoulder, screaming. The remaining men, including Jake, ran for their horses. Nathan finally got his hands free and grabbed Jake before he could mount, dragging him back down. They fought savagely, rolling in the dirt, trading blows. Nathan's vision narrowed to simple survival, simple fury. This man had threatened his family, had tried to hurt the people Nathan loved most in the world. He did not remember the details later, only the feeling of his fists connecting with flesh, the taste of blood, the desperate need to make Jake pay for his crimes. It was Peta's voice that finally cut through the red haze. "Nathan, stop. He is unconscious. You are going to kill him." Nathan pulled back, breathing hard, his hands bloody. Jake lay motionless beneath him, face swollen and bleeding but chest still rising and falling. The other conscious man from Jake's group had fled on foot into the woods, abandoning his injured companions. "Are you hurt?" Nathan asked Peta urgently, stumbling to his feet. "The children, are they safe?" "We are fine, shaken but fine." Peta had tears streaming down her face. "But Gray Wind, Nathan, he was shot." Nathan found the wolf lying near the porch, blood matting his silver fur. The animal whined weakly when Nathan knelt beside him. There was a wound in his shoulder and another in his flank, both bleeding freely. "Help me get him inside," Peta said. "I need my medicines, need to stop the bleeding." They carried Gray Wind into the cabin together, laying him on the thick rug before the fire. Emily huddled in the corner with baby Nathaniel, both children crying. The man Peta had shot in the shoulder was groaning outside, and one man was dead, Peta's first shot having found his heart. Nathan left Peta to work on Gray Wind and went to deal with the wounded man. He tied the man's wound with rough efficiency, then bound him securely. Jake was still unconscious, so Nathan bound him as well. Then he went to check on Emily and Nathaniel, gathering both children into his arms. "It is over," he told Emily, whose whole body was shaking. "You were so brave. Both of you were so brave. Everything is going to be all right." "Is Gray Wind going to die?" Emily asked through her tears. "Your mother is the best healer I know. If anyone can save him, she can." Nathan kissed the top of Emily's head, then checked Nathaniel, who was miraculously unhurt, just frightened by all the noise and chaos. Peta worked on Gray Wind for hours, extracting bullets, cleaning wounds, stitching and bandaging. The wolf remained conscious but weak, his yellow eyes following her every movement. When she finally sat back, exhausted, Nathan brought her water and held her while she cried from relief and spent fear. "Will he live?" Nathan asked quietly. "I think so. The bullets missed anything vital. But he lost a lot of blood, and infection is always a risk. The next few days will tell." Peta wiped her eyes. "He saved us, Nathan. If Gray Wind had not attacked when he did, those men would have." "I know." Nathan held her tighter. "I know. That wolf saved my family. I owe him everything." They spent a sleepless night watching over Gray Wind and guarding their prisoners. At dawn, Nathan rode for Helena to fetch the territorial marshal, leaving Peta armed and ready to defend their home if the fled men returned. But none did, and by evening Nathan was back with the marshal and 2 deputies. The lawmen arrested the surviving attackers and took statements from Nathan and Peta. The marshal promised that Jake and his companion would face trial for arson, assault, and attempted murder. The dead man was loaded onto a horse and taken away to be buried in town. "You folks did good, defending yourselves," the marshal said before leaving. "This kind of violence, it cannot stand. Those men will hang for what they did here today." After the marshal left, Nathan and Peta stood together in the yard, surveying the damage. The barn was a total loss, the animals dead. The cabin had been damaged but was still standing. And inside, Gray Wind fought for his life while Emily sat beside him, reading aloud from her primer, her small hand resting on his head. "We can rebuild," Peta said quietly. "The barn, everything. We can start again." "I am so sorry," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "I brought this on us. If I had not interfered with those hunters last year, if I had just minded my own business, then Gray Wind would be dead. I never would have found you, and we would not have this life, this family." Peta turned to face Nathan, her hands framing his face. "You did the right thing, Nathan. You always do the right thing. What happened today was not your fault. It was the fault of evil men who chose violence. But we survived because we stood together, because we had Gray Wind, because we were strong." Nathan kissed her, pouring everything he felt into the gesture. Love and gratitude and relief and sorrow and hope all tangled together. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Gray Wind survived. Against the odds, the tough animal pulled through, and within a week was hobbling around the cabin, accepting treats from Emily and bumping his head against Peta's hand for attention. He would walk with a limp for the rest of his life, matching the slight limp from his puppy injury, but he was alive, and that was what mattered. Nathan rebuilt the barn over the following months, this time making it larger and stronger. They acquired new animals to replace the ones killed, horses and cows and chickens. Neighbors they barely knew showed up to help with the construction, having heard about the attack, bringing food and lumber and labor. The frontier community might be rough and isolated, but it took care of its own. Word came from Helena in November that Jake and his companion had been found guilty and hanged. Nathan felt no joy in their deaths, only relief that the threat was finally ended, that his family could live without fear. Winter came again, their 3rd winter together, and with it came peace. Nathan watched his family around the dinner table. Peta nursing baby Nathaniel, Emily reading by lamplight, Gray Wind sleeping by the fire. This was what he had saved, what the wolf had helped him find. Connection, love, purpose, home. The years passed in the way years do, marked by seasons and growth and change. Nathaniel learned to walk and talk, following his father around the property and playing with Gray Wind, who tolerated the toddler's clumsy affection with patience. Emily grew taller, helping more with the farm work and showing an aptitude for healing that delighted Peta. In the spring of 1879, Peta gave birth to their 2nd child, A daughter they named Josephine Morning Lawson, combining Nathan's mother's name with a Cherokee word meaning dawn. The baby had her father's lighter coloring but her mother's features, and from the moment she drew breath she was adored by her entire family. Gray Wind was older now, his muzzle graying, moving more slowly. But he remained devoted to his pack, especially to the children. Nathan often found the old wolf lying in the meadow with Nathaniel and Josephine curled against his warm side, the three of them napping in the sun while Emily kept watch nearby. "He is getting old," Peta said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the children play. "Wolves do not live as long as dogs, perhaps another year or two if we are lucky." "I know." Nathan felt a tightness in his chest at the thought, but what a life he has had, from an orphaned pup with a broken leg to the guardian of our family. He could have ended up as a pelt on some hunter's wall, but instead he is here, loved and valued. "Everything happens as it should," Peta said, taking Nathan's hand. "He was meant to bring us together, and we have given him a good life in return." A letter arrived in the summer of 1880, delivered by a passing trapper. It was addressed to Peta, written in careful English by her father's hand. Nathan watched his wife read it, saw emotions flicker across her face: surprise, joy, sadness, uncertainty. "My father wants to meet you," Peta said finally. "He is inviting us to come to his camp to bring the children. He says he is old and wants to know his grandchildren before he dies." "You want to go?" Nathan asked. "Yes. I have not seen my father in almost 5 years. But I am nervous about how he will receive you, how the others in the camp will treat our children." Peta's hands trembled slightly as she folded the letter. "We are a family that crosses boundaries, Nathan. Not everyone will accept that." "Then those who do not accept us will have to look away," Nathan said firmly. "I am not ashamed of my family, and you should not be either. If your father wants to meet us, we will go. And if others have problems with who we are, that is their concern, not ours." They made the journey north in early autumn, when the weather was still mild and the children were old enough to travel comfortably. Nathaniel was 4, Josephine nearly 2, and Emily was 13, poised on the edge of young womanhood. Gray Wind came with them, of course, though the old wolf struggled to keep up and often rode on one of the pack horses. Peta's father's camp was nestled in a valley between 2 mountains, perhaps 50 people living in a mix of traditional structures and rough cabins. They were met with curiosity and some hostility, but Peta's father, a dignified man in his 70s named Standing Oak, welcomed them warmly. "My daughter," he said, embracing Peta. "I have missed you. And I you, father." Peta introduced Nathan and the children, and Standing Oak greeted each one gravely, his old eyes taking in every detail. "Your man, he has kind eyes," Standing Oak said to Peta in Cherokee, then switched to English for Nathan's benefit. "You chose well, daughter. I see that he loves you and cares for you." "He does," Peta confirmed. "He is a good husband and a good father." They stayed in the camp for 2 weeks, and Nathan found himself welcomed more than he had expected. The people here were not naive about white settlers, about broken treaties and stolen land and murdered kin. But they judged Nathan as an individual, not as a representative of his race, and found him respectful and honest. Emily thrived among other Cherokee people, learning stories and songs from the elders, playing with children her own age. Nathaniel and Josephine were doted on by everyone, passed from lap to lap and fed treats until they were sticky and giggling. And Gray Wind, despite his age and obvious wolf nature, was treated with respect and even reverence by some who saw him as a spirit guide. Standing Oak spent long hours with Nathan, teaching him Cherokee words and customs, sharing stories of his people's history. "You are family now," the old man told Nathan on their last evening. "Not because you married my daughter, but because you treat her and her heritage with respect. Not all white men would do that. Your people have wisdom mine could learn from," Nathan replied. "I am honored to be part of this family." The journey back to their cabin felt different, fuller somehow. Nathan and Peta had brought their worlds together, bridged the divide that might have separated them, and created something new and strong. Their children were of two peoples, two cultures, and would be better for it. Gray Wind died peacefully in his sleep 2 months after they returned home, on a cold December morning. Nathan found him curled on his rug by the fireplace, looking as if he were simply sleeping, but with no breath moving his chest. The old wolf was gone. The entire family grieved. Emily cried for hours, and even Nathaniel, who was too young to fully understand death, seemed to sense the loss and grew quiet and clingy. Nathan dug a grave in the meadow where Gray Wind had loved to lie in the sun, and they buried him wrapped in a beautiful blanket Peta had woven. Standing Oak had given them seeds for a special tree, and they planted it over the grave, a living memorial. "He was the best of us," Nathan said at the graveside, his arm around Peta's shoulders. The children gathered close. "He protected us, loved us, brought us together. We were his pack, and he was ours. May his spirit run free in whatever wild place waits beyond." They stood there as the sun set, a family united in love and loss, and Nathan felt Gray Wind's absence like a physical ache. But he also felt gratitude, profound and deep. That wolf pup he had sheltered from hunters 6 years ago had given him everything that mattered: love, family, purpose, home. Time moved forward as it must. Nathaniel grew strong and curious, shadowing his father on the trap lines and learning to track and hunt. Josephine was clever and quick, absorbing her mother's knowledge of healing plants and medicines. Emily, at 18, met a young man in Helena, the son of a blacksmith, and after a proper courtship, they married with Nathan and Peta's blessing. She settled in town but visited often, bringing her own children as they came. Peta and Nathan added 2 more children to their family over the following years. A son named Thomas, and then, when Peta was 40 and they had long stopped expecting more children, twin girls they named Grace and Hope. The cabin expanded again and again, rooms added, a second story constructed until it was more house than cabin, full of life and noise and love. Standing Oak died when Nathan was 45, and they made the journey north for the funeral. Peta grieved deeply for her father but took comfort in knowing he had lived to see his grandchildren grow, had accepted her choices and blessed her life. She became the keeper of certain stories and songs he had taught her, passing them on to their children so the knowledge would not be lost. Nathan's trapping business evolved over time. He took on 2 younger men as partners, teaching them the trade as River Song had taught him. He became known as a fair dealer, a man of his word, and his business prospered enough to provide well for his growing family. But he never forgot where he came from, and he never took for granted the second chance at life and love that Peta and Gray Wind had given him. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan and Peta took a rare day away from the children and rode to the meadow where Gray Wind was buried. The tree they had planted had grown tall and strong, its leaves rustling in the wind. They sat beneath it, holding hands, looking back at the life they had built. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Leaving your people, marrying me, choosing this life?" "Never," Peta said firmly. "You are my home, Nathan. You and our children. Everything I have done, every choice I have made brought me here. How could I regret that?" "I used to think I was meant to be alone," Nathan confessed. "That I was too broken, too damaged by the war and everything after. But you showed me I was wrong. You and a wolf pup with a broken leg." Peta laughed, the sound warm and rich. We were all a little broken, I think, but we healed each other. That is what love does. They made love there under the tree, in the soft grass of the meadow, celebrating 20 years of marriage and partnership and survival. Afterward, they lay tangled together, watching clouds drift across the blue Montana sky, and Nathan felt a peace so complete it was almost overwhelming. "I want to grow old with you," he said quietly. "Watch our grandchildren grow, build a legacy that lasts beyond us." "We will," Peta promised. "We have weathered every storm, survived every threat. Nothing can break us now," and she was right. The years continued to pass, bringing the normal trials of life. Illness and injury, hard winters and crop failures, occasional conflicts with neighbors or business rivals. But Nathan and Peta faced everything together, a united front that could not be broken. Emily's children visited often, and Nathaniel married a schoolteacher from Helena, bringing her home to meet his family. Josephine showed no interest in marriage, preferring to dedicate herself to healing work alongside her mother, and Nathan and Peta supported her choice. Thomas became a tracker like his father, working for the territorial government surveying new lands. And the twins, Grace and Hope, were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and sharing everything. When Nathan was 55, the governor of Montana Territory invited him to serve on a committee evaluating relations between settlers and native tribes. It was a recognition of his unique position, married to a Cherokee woman, raising mixed-blood children, respected by both communities. Nathan accepted, hoping to bring some small measure of understanding and fairness to policies that had been so destructive for so long. Peta traveled with him to the territorial capital, leaving their younger children in Emily's care. They spent months meeting with tribal leaders and government officials, trying to find common ground, trying to prevent more violence and displacement. It was frustrating work, often seeming futile against the tide of westward expansion and the government's hunger for land. But they made some small differences, secured some protections, and Nathan felt he was honoring Gray Wind's memory by fighting for justice and peace. They returned home exhausted but satisfied, and Nathan realized he was ready to slow down, to spend his remaining years close to home and family rather than chasing ambition or duty. He sold his share of the trapping business to his partners, keeping only enough work to stay active and occupied. Peta continued her healing work, but focused more on teaching Josephine and other young women who wanted to learn, passing on knowledge that might otherwise be lost. On a summer evening in 1896, when Nathan was 60 and Peta 54, they sat on their porch watching the sunset, surrounded by the sounds of their extended family. Emily and her husband had brought their 4 children for a visit. Nathaniel and his wife were there with their 2 sons. Josephine was showing Thomas how to prepare a particular healing salve, and the twins, Grace and Hope, now 17 and beautiful, were laughing together over some private joke. "We did well," Peta said softly, her hand in Nathan's. "Look at what we built, Nathan. Look at all these lives we created and nurtured." "We did," Nathan agreed, his throat tight with emotion. "And it all started with a wolf pup I couldn't leave to die." "No," Peta corrected gently. "It started with a good man who chose compassion over convenience, who risked danger to save a helpless creature. That is who you are, Nathan Lawson. That is why I loved you from the moment I met you." Nathan turned to kiss his wife, this woman who had given him everything, who had seen in him something worth loving when he could barely see it himself. Behind them, their children and grandchildren filled the house with life and laughter, the legacy of one impulsive act of kindness decades ago. "You think Gray Wind knew?" Nathan asked, a question he had pondered many times over the years. that saving him would lead to all of this. I think animals understand more than we give them credit for, Peta replied, looking toward the meadow where the tree grew over the wolf's grave. And I think he chose to trust you, chose to lead me to you, because something in him recognized something in you. A kindred spirit, perhaps. A fellow survivor who deserved love and family. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. The air smelled of pine and wildflowers and the dinner cooking inside. Children's voices drifted through the open windows, singing a song Peta had taught them, half in English and half in Cherokee. Nathan thought about the long path that had brought him here, from a Tennessee farm to a war zone to the vast wilderness of Montana. He thought about loss and loneliness, violence and grief, and how close he had come to giving up on the possibility of happiness. But then a wolf pup had tumbled down a slope, and a Cherokee woman had appeared at his door, and everything had changed. "Thank you," he said to Peta, squeezing her hand. "For every day, every moment. Thank you." "Thank you," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "For choosing to be brave, to be kind, to let yourself love again. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible." As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Montana sky, Nathan Lawson sat on his porch with his wife of 30 years and felt complete. He had found what every person searches for: purpose, belonging, love. He had built a family that would carry on long after he was gone, children and grandchildren, who embodied hope and resilience, and the power of different worlds coming together in understanding. And it had all begun with one simple choice: to shelter a wolf pup from hunters, to show mercy when it would have been easier to look away. That choice had led to everything else, had been the first step on a journey that brought him love and redemption and home. The wolf might be gone, sleeping beneath the tree in the meadow, but Gray Wind's legacy lived on in every member of this family, in the lessons taught and the values passed down. The spirit of that brave, loyal animal would endure as long as the Lawson family endured, woven into their very bones. Inside the house, someone called them to dinner. Nathan stood and helped Peta to her feet, and they walked inside together, into the warmth and light and love, leaving the empty porch behind. But even as the door closed, Nathan glanced back once more toward the meadow, toward the tree and the grave beneath it, and silently thanked the wolf that had given him everything. The story of how Nathan Lawson sheltered a wolf pup from hunters and woke the next morning to find a Cherokee woman at his door became legend in their family, told and retold to each new generation. It became the foundation myth of who they were, a testament to the power of compassion and the unpredictable paths love can take. And though the details might shift slightly with each telling, the core truth remained constant: that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything, can redirect the course of an entire life toward something better, something worth celebrating and protecting and cherishing until the very end.